Okay, I know the sequel is not nearly as good. I learned that the hard way after people read my second book, Ethics in Motion, and compared it to the first. The reviews weren't as favorable, but we're going to do it again. And what I mean is I'm back filming at Santa Ana Courthouse today, and I'm going to film and memorialize this experience from another sentencing hearing. Today, we have a different judge from last week, I think, fortunately. Today, we're going to present in front of Judge David Carter, phenomenal judge. And I mentioned that he's a phenomenal judge, in my opinion, because he's willing to listen to the defendants. And I do not believe his mind is made up when he sits down at the bench. Over the years, I think our team has had at least 10 or 15 clients go in front of Judge Carter. This is the 5th sentencing hearing I've attended, and I'm super excited to present our client. So here's the situation on game day before we approach sentencing. Our client has a guideline range of 51 to 61 months in prison. Of course, our goal is to have a sentence that is significantly shorter. In advance of this sentencing hearing, our client has been working incredibly well with his lawyers, including Peter Hardin, an excellent lawyer here in Orange County. It's how I met our client, through Peter. When I mean excellent, or the way he's been preparing so successfully, is he's taken this incredibly seriously over the last 6 years, which is how long this investigation has gone on, and really worked to create a new record that demonstrates why he's worthy of leniency. We'll articulate to Judge Carter why he will never return to another courtroom. And I believe Judge Carter is willing to see authenticity through defendants. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we had a client, Tom Finley. I'll put up a little link to a review he wrote about our company. Tom Finley, a lawyer in Dallas, was sentenced by Judge Carter, and instead of getting a prison term, which is what the government requested, Tom was sentenced to home confinement because he was able to express what he learned and why he would never return to another courtroom. So super excited to support our client today. It may sound insane when I say I'm excited, but as I mentioned in that last sentencing video from just a few days ago, at least our client today is going to have clarity. And regardless of what the number is, he will have self-esteem and dignity, knowing he's done everything he could to prepare. I'm going to report back following the sentencing hearing in front of Judge Carter with the ultimate sentence. Okay, let's disregard everything I said about the sequel not being as good. That was as engaging and unique sentencing hearing as I've attended in a really long time. It started off pretty normally. Judge Carter opened up by actually reading excerpts of our client's personal narrative. He referenced specific pages and paragraphs from the narrative that articulated our client's remorse and shame, details about his background. So I found that to be very helpful, having the judge actually read the narrative, because every now and again I'm asked, does the judge read the narrative? Of course the judge reads the narrative, though it's nice to hear the judge actually reading portions of it. From there, the judge mentioned that he'd welcome hearing from the defendant, presuming the defendant is not going to read the lengthy narrative that was turned in, because Judge said I had read it several times over the weekend. I'm happy to have you allocute as long as it is a different statement, of which of course it is. We worked on a different sentencing statement. From there, our client's lawyer began to speak about some of the background and details and history of the case, including the length of the case, going on more than 5 years. And he did something I liked. He said, "Your Honor, I'm really going to defer to our client to express the remorse and shame that he articulated through his narrative, through his statement today, but more so through his actions over the last 5 or 6 years." I like that, because if you've seen the federal video, the video we've done with federal Judge Stephen Boo, he articulates that what's most impactful to him, and he believes other judges, is hearing about the remorse and shame from the defendant. As Judge Boo said, if you broke my window, don't say I'm sorry, tell me how you're going to fix the window. I think only a defendant can do that. So I thought that was a very good strategy by the defense attorney. After our client spoke, and his wife also spoke, she did an incredible job speaking from the heart about the type of husband and father our client is, the U.S. attorney began to speak. And it was clear this U.S. attorney took this case personally. She was enraged. She was angry. She got so worked up, I think she struggled to actually speak. A few times the court reporter had to ask her to slow down. In fact, a couple of times the judge said, "I lost you. Would you please start over? You are going too fast. Please start again." One time he said too TMI, which is too much information. "Let's start over and do this again." So I sense the government was a little unprepared, but also so angry that this U.S. attorney let their personal feelings or enmity towards our client get in the way of trying to articulate why they think he's worthy of going to prison for 51 months. So I found that to be very interesting, and having the judge, frankly, hold hold both sides accountable. In fact, this judge, Judge Carter, will ask more questions than most sentencing judges in my 12-year, 1,000 sentencing hearing experience. And he frequently said, I'm going to ask you questions, I want the answers. Not pretend you're not lawyers, because lawyers dance around the questions. I'm going to ask you a question, I want you to answer. If you don't know the answer, tell me the truth, or just tell me you don't know, but don't waste my time and do not dance around the issue. So if you're not prepared as a defense attorney or U.S. attorney in front of Judge Carter, you have a problem, because he's engaged, he asks questions, and he's willing to see both sides, as I articulated earlier in the interview. So continuing, what I found, we've got some helpful stuff as I go through my notes here. A little windy out here in Santa Ana, so I'm trying to articulate or go through this as best I possibly can. Judge Carter spent several minutes going through the history of the case, the timeline of the case, and really eloquently spoke about the victims, but not just the victims being people who might have been defrauded, but also the family. In fact, Judge Carter specifically said, I view the family just as much as a victim as anybody else. He also likes to know who's in the courtroom supporting the defendant. I thought that was helpful. What really changed this hearing and made it different from a lot of other hearings I've attended, and pay attention to those of you getting sentenced, was the U.S. attorney leveling essentially new charges against our client, essentially saying that his criminal conduct is continuing. Now, this case has gone on for 6 years, and they've been examining his conduct over a 6-year period of time. The selfie stick my wife bought me is starting to get a little heavy, but I think I'm strong enough to hold it. Bear with me. So she went on at length, as did the FBI agent who was in the room, that he was continuing to engage in new conduct. And that's essentially the way he lives his life, is some continuing criminal who's a threat to the community. Now, I think some judges might have agreed with it or not probed as much as Judge Carter did, but he essentially said, wait a second, hold on, wait. You're telling me he's continuing to do it? That is a inflammatory statement. Can you prove it? That is a big allegation that he's continuing to engage in new conduct. Can you prove it? And everyone just sort of sat there for a moment. It's a really big deal in our client's case, the government alleging new conduct. Can you prove it? Can you answer the question? Do not dance around it. You seem to have a hard time answering the question. Then the U.S. attorney said, well, we believe it to be true, Your Honor. Do you have it? Do you have the proof? Is he continuing to do it? And everyone just sat there in the courtroom. And on a personal note, as I'm hearing this, I'm thinking about this U.S. attorney who's so out for vengeance and to put someone in prison for an unnecessary long period of time, and perhaps willing to say and do anything in order to secure that conviction. So when Judge Carter said, great, prove it, they couldn't. And they said, we believe it to be true, but we can't prove it. So from there, Judge Carter's exact words were, great, thank you. That argument that he's continuing to engage in criminal conduct is off the table. You have no proof that he's continuing to defraud investors, he said again. It is off the table. I found that to be a win for our client, because it was an unfair, I think, unethical attack, and I'm really grateful that Judge Carter probed and pushed it further. From there, Judge Carter spoke a little bit about how long this case had actually gone on, and I say this to provide some solace to all of you defendants whose case has gone on for many, many years, and I know waiting and wondering what's going to happen is the hardest part. Judge Carter is clearly aware of that. In fact, specifically, he told the defendant, I believe that you're remorseful. I also know this has gone on for more than 5 years, and I know it's inhumane and cruel for this to go on for so long and to have a hammer on your neck for more than 5 years. I know you're faced with a tremendous amount of pressure, and I can understand that you're concerned. So to have a federal judge acknowledge the stress and pressure of this criminal case is very helpful. And then he insinuated that because of how long this has gone on pretrial, he's inclined to downward depart. I got that sense. And also perhaps make a change on supervised release. From there, I think the government being angry that they had not proven their case, that our client was continuing to engage in criminal conduct. They then went on to say that our client was inaccessible during the time of negotiating the plea, and that he traveled the globe to Europe, namely, and was unreachable. And the judge really wanted to break that down and say, I'd like everyone to break. I would like the defense attorney to get clarity with the defendant on exactly how long he was in Europe, because I've gotten the impression from the government that your client was vacationing in Europe for weeks and months on end, and he was unreachable, which according to the government delayed the accepting of responsibility, delayed signing of the plea agreement, and that's part of the reason this has gone on for so many years. From there, the defense attorney spoke with the defendant, got clarity that he had been to Europe for 6 times over these 5 or 6 years, on average for about a week, and the judge said, okay, so we can then all agree that this client was simply vacationing in Europe for a week or working for a week, but he was not living in Europe unaccessible. And the government said, yes, Your Honor. So that was another, I think, benefit to our client. From there, Judge Carter said, unfortunately, this has run long, and I have questions, and I have more questions, and I don't want to be pressured, and I have a court hearing with a case in jail in 12 minutes, so you can come back this afternoon to finish, or you can come back next week, but I'm not yet ready to rule. So here we stand on a sentencing hearing that I expected to be concluded. Not going to happen today. We are going to return for sentencing. It appears to be not next week, but later this week. When I do, I will film the final video in this series and let you know if our client got 51 months, which is what the government is suggesting. I expect between now and the sentencing, the government will probably get angrier and look for any evidence and facts that could seek to show why our client is worthy of at least the 51 months in prison that they're suggesting, and our client will continue this waiting game for another 4 or 5 days that he's endured for 6 years. Thank you for allowing me to recite these notes as best as I possibly can here in a windy day in Santa Ana, and of course I hope you're finding value in these live videos that I'm doing following sentencing. Okay, it's Justin Paperny. Well, of course it's me, it's my YouTube channel. Okay, March 2nd, back at the sentencing hearing that's been continued. It's been going on for about an hour. We have a little break. The prosecutors had to get some information that was in their office, so they went down to get it, and here we are, so I want to provide an update. The hearing opened by Judge Carter asking everyone in the courtroom to identify why they're here and who we are, and we all did that. He then told the government and the defense team, the prosecutors are going to be walking down the hall in a moment, so I better do this quickly before we get back in. I don't know how they'd feel about this. The judge then told the defense attorney and government, you can retrace your arguments and the defendant can allocute again, which is very important. This judge is very engaging with the defendant, asks a lot of questions while speaking, so it's essential for defendants who have turned in a personal narrative. I'm just looking in the wrong spot. It's essential for all defendants who turn in a narrative to make sure that everything you say is consistent with the narrative, because some judges are going to ask questions and pick it apart. So everything you turn in must be incredibly consistent. If you see anything that contradicts with what you've written, you're going to look like a fraud. Our client got through it well, but Judge Carter asks penetrating questions. Your narrative must align with your statement. Judge Carter spent a lot of time asking about how the money was spent. So the government alleges a very large fraud, and Judge Carter went on to say, well, he wasn't buying diamonds or cars or yachts. What was he doing with the money and how much was it? And, learning more about it. And Judge Carter spoke at length how a lot of defendants in his courtroom, fraudsters, will buy Ferraris and diamonds and cars and get a new younger wife. And he didn't see that here. Client's been married for a very long time. And so there's dispute over how they spent the money, what the losses actually were. And, both sides were going back and forth. Judge Carter is very influenced by how defense attorneys respond and react. He doesn't like when they jump up, if they're somewhat rude. In fact, he told the AUSA, don't do that in my courtroom. Do that someplace else. If you're disturbed, say it. Do not give me that body language. So he is frankly very difficult on both sides, but he wants the facts. He wants to know if there were losses, where the money was spent, if there was fraud, how much and where did it go, and now where does it stand? The government is trying to get some information that is going to hopefully further their argument that the defendant should get the length of the prison term they want, which is 51 months in prison. So that's the little break from the ninth floor at the Santa Ana courthouse, hoping our client doesn't get 51 to 61 months. It does look like our client is going to get some term in prison, which kind of makes sense when you hear 51 to 61 months. He said to him, there is going to be a prison term here. The question is how much. He then also said, he reiterated, I know you've been in the dungeon for 4 to 5 years as this case played out. So I'm going to head back in. Prosecutors are coming, I think, and I'll report back with my final video after sentencing. If there's ever one federal judge I'd like to have a drink with, it would be federal judge David Carter. He's incredible. He's introspective, he's thoughtful, he's tough on both sides. And even in the end, when he was about to rule, he sat there for many minutes and continued to ask very tough questions of the government and of our client, the defendant. And right as it was closing, Peter Hardin, an excellent defense attorney here in Orange County, just terrific, he had an opportunity to speak. And rather than continue to talk about how remorseful and ashamed the defendant was or is, he allowed the defendant to do it. It was very tactful, it was very strategic, because of course lawyers are paid to talk about why their clients are worthy of leniency, and he did it well. But it was a final opportunity for the defendant to articulate that message, and he did it authentically with a great deal of remorse. And that work from everyone led to judge saying, I'm going to give you an extraordinary lenient sentence. I'm going to give you a sentence of 24 months in custody, which I know is hard, but I'm sending you to prison. 24 months. I want to get on the record, Judge Carter said, that this is an extraordinary lenient sentence because I believe the defendant is genuinely remorseful. So I've written a second book called Ethics in Motion. I think I should write one called Mitigation in Motion, because this is the heart of mitigation. Identifying with victims, expressing remorse, sharing lessons learned, and of course articulating why you will never return to the courtroom as a defendant. Our client did it well. His defense attorney did it very well. And as a team, we were able to demonstrate that he was different than the government's version of events. So thank you very much for following along and watching this video of a second sentencing hearing over the last couple of weeks. Very emotional. And not only did he get 24 months, he also got just 2 years of supervised release. And Judge Carter said, if you're doing well on supervised release, I'll let you off early. Our client has several months to surrender to a prison here in Southern California. Thank you so much for watching this. If you're going through this, I know it's hard. I'm so grateful you allow our team to come into your home to educate and guide you. I'm not so far removed from this process that I don't know what it's like. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. I know what I put my family through, and I know how poorly I prepared for so long. And when I began to take action, things changed. Whether our team works with you or not, I want all of you to take action. I want all of you to prepare, and I don't want any of you to live with regret that you could have done more. Hold your lawyer accountable, hold yourself accountable, and work to demonstrate that you are better than the government's version of events. If I did it, if our clients can do it, I assure you, you can as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm going to go spend some time with our client. Goodbye.